Before we dig into today's episode, I want to take a moment and talk about something close to my home, my journey into podcasting. Dog with a Bone is my first season, and I am beyond grateful to have teamed up with James Baysinger and Sasquatch Productions. If you're into deep dives, real boots on the ground investigations, and the kind of storytelling that leaves no stone unturned, you'll want to check out James's own podcast, Hide and Seek. He's currently working on season 4, but if you haven't yet, I highly recommend starting with season 1 through 3. They're all out now. Welcome back to Dog with a Bone podcast. This is episode 10, The Murder Board. Please make sure to like and follow us on Dog with a Bone Facebook or Instagram page to join in on the investigation as we move through the season. I would love to hear your thoughts on the episodes previously and the ones to come. You can also subscribe to Dog with a Bone podcast on Spotify or wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode. All names mentioned are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Can you all believe that we have finally arrived at our last episode of the first season of Dog with a Bone? I can't. And I've been thinking about the best way to end this season, and I decided it would be best if we ended it right where it all started, in the town of Marysville. So after our meeting with Paula and Steve, we made our way back to Marysville to meet up with Asia, the agent from BCI, and Joel, who represented Union County Sheriff's Office.
Hi! Hello. Are you Asia?
Yes, I am.
Nice to meet you. I'm Melissa.
Nice to meet you, Melissa.
The meeting lasted well over an hour, and for obvious reasons, I'm not going to share with you specific details of our conversation. However, I did share with Agent Mason my interview with Eric, meeting with Olivia, and the briefcase Bernie's dad had with all of his notes. Overall, I felt it was a very productive meeting. Agent Mason asked questions and was engaged in the conversation. She was very interested in what I had discovered to this point in the investigation. We said our goodbyes and our plan to continue to stay in contact as I uncover more information. After we left the sheriff's office, we headed over to Bernie's house. My goal was to finally see the place where Bernie had lived to get a feel for how things might have happened that night. The house was smaller in size, but it would have been perfect for a bachelor like Bernie. As I stood in the living room, my eyes spanned the whole house. I could see into the kitchen and that step down that Bo described. I actually thought to myself, I am standing right where Bo says she stood that night that Bernie was in the kitchen talking with the cops. I had asked Bo if she could hear the conversations being had in the kitchen. She said she couldn't. The distance is not that far, but if the voices were low or the scene was hectic, I can see why it would have been hard to hear what was being said. Bo recalls she was not in the home long, maybe 10 minutes, before she took Eric back to Steffen's to get Jackie. As I made my way through the living room into the kitchen, I took that step down and ended up in the breezeway. If you have not yet joined Dog with a Bone Facebook page, I have a photo of the breezeway posted there. But to give you a visual, to my left, I looked at the patio door that leads out into the balcony. Straight ahead of me was the room that Bernie had built the bar and game room. To the right of that room was Bernie's bedroom. To the far right is the side door into the breezeway that Eric claims he and Wessel broke into the next day. Out of privacy for the homeowners, we did not go into what would have been Bernie's bedroom, given it is, well, now their room. But I do want to take a minute and give a big thank you to the homeowners for letting me and my team inside their house and allowing me to look around. This provided me an opportunity to really visualize the events of that night. It is always critical to go back to the scene of a crime and walk through different scenarios that might have happened. As I walked away from the house, I looked over my shoulder and a few thoughts came to my mind. First was I kept thinking about how small the house was and what a tight fit it would have been with so many officers there. The second thing was the front door was locked from the inside, so whoever killed Bernie ensured they locked the doors behind them. They were also not in a hurry. They had thought it all out to ensure to stage it as a suicide, lock the doors, and turn off the lights. Keep this in mind as we go through the murder board. And really, this wraps up my second trip to Marysville, and with that, I think it's time that we look at the murder board. As with any crime, it is important we look at the crime and examine who was around the victim during the window of when Bernie was murdered. Who had the means, motive, and opportunity to commit this crime and also stage it as a suicide? Let's start with Jo. Jo continues to stick to the same account she did 30 years ago that she told Bernie's dad. It is difficult to remember lies being told rather than the truth. Jo remembers specific details of the conversations being had in the kitchen. I didn't prompt her at what house this conversation happened at, but she remembered right away, the house on Claiborne. They also were in the kitchen. This was very specific information that you just don't pull out of thin air. Same thing she said back then. Jo was at the Hideaway Bar during the burglary, and after the bar closed, she went home with Alan. I don't see why Jo would return to Bernie's house after the cops had been there. I moved Jo to the side. So let's look at Alan. Given Jo and Ray, Alan's brother, both confirm Alan was the one who attempted to steal the safe, the question is now this: did Alan return to Bernie's to commit the murder? We have to ask ourselves, did Alan have the means, motive, and opportunity? So let's break it down. Means? Yes. The steel pipe could have been used as the object to hit Bernie in the head, or any object with great strength. Opportunity? Is it possible he could have returned without Jo knowing about it? Possible, but I think unlikely. And motive. What would Alan's motive be? The coke and cash were gone. If his name was in the book, that was already gone. Alan also passed a lie detector test regarding the murder, and he also confessed to the burglary. We know that lie detectors are used for investigative purposes only, but it does help support his account that he did not go back and murder Bernie. John. Same thing goes for John. Ray, Jo, Alan all made statements they broke into Bernie's house. Olivia said her and John drove the opposite direction to John's house and they were there the rest of the night. Again, the means and opportunity is there for John, but what about motive? What would the reason be for going back? But I want to pause for a moment and provide another piece of information. I had a caller tell me about a conversation someone had overheard regarding John and Alan and their possible involvement in Bernie's murder.
When Dave went back to work, they were shorthanded and had to hire a couple guys. So they hired John now. And Rick, he's the owner of the company of Brinco at the time. When you hired on with him, he was real sneaky. He never did any work. He was just the owner of the company. And he would check up on you, and he'd sneak up on you, and he'd watch you, and you wouldn't know he's there. And, to make sure you were working and what kind of worker you were and all that. And right. He and Dave overheard Alan and John laughing and joking about watching them kicking around when they were suffocating them. But so, that's circumstantial stuff, but, that's what Dave told me.
Based on the information that was overheard, I lean towards this account not being possible for a few reasons, but I wanted to be fully transparent and not be nearsighted in my investigation. Here's the reasons why I tend to believe this isn't possible. Number one, Bernie was knocked unconscious, so he would not have been kicking and fighting when the bag was placed over his head. Number 2, John and Alan would have had to wait out the cops to leave before entering, killing, and staging the scene before Bo, Eric, and Jackie returned within the 20 minutes. Given the timeline of all of these, I find it unlikely. And third, you have Joe and Olivia confirming that they didn't go back after the bar closed and John and Alan were with them. I think it's time that we move John and Alan off the murder board. So let's take a look at Jackie. As far as Jackie goes, she was not involved in the setup that I have been able to uncover. For Jackie to have killed Bernie or been involved in the cover-up, it would have had to happen after the murder. This means they would have had to break in that night after they returned without Bo. But we know from the timeline and how long someone can live with a bag placed over their head, this is not likely. I move Jackie to the side. Eric. As I have mentioned before, I do believe Eric set up this whole thing. He set up the burglary. Eric knew about the safe, when Bernie got the drugs, the money, the cash, the alarm system. Joe also recalls details of Eric being in the kitchen having this conversation. I think it's likely that this is true. Now, do we have a means, motive, and opportunity for Eric to murder Bernie? Means? Yes. Opportunity? Is it possible Eric returned after Bo and Jackie and something escalated between him and Bernie? I just don't think so, as Bernie was already not answering the door when Bo came back with Jackie and Eric. Motive? Did a heated argument erupt due to Bernie discovering Eric had set up the burglary, and then Eric and Jackie staged it? Possible. This motive and opportunity is one I have worked through so many times in my head with Eric. But at the end of the day, we have Bo saying that when they returned, Bernie was not answering the door. This means that Bernie had already been knocked unconscious and the bag placed over his head. As much as Eric lies, his timeline of returning has always remained the same. Now, I hear you. If this was just Eric's word alone, I would struggle more. But we have Bo's statement. Plus, we know that Bernie was alive a max of 10 minutes after the bag was placed on his head. There is a motive, but I can't find the opportunity given Bo was with Eric from the time they left the house to the time they went to Stefan's and returned back to Bernie's. He's accounted for. I move Eric off to the side. An unknown person. Is it possible someone unknown came and committed a murder? Drug dealer, somebody who was afraid Bernie would talk. I do not feel like this is likely, but let's take a look at it. The unknown person would have had to know that the cops had been called, arrive at Bernie's house, wait for the cops to leave, attack Bernie, stage the scene, and get out of the house quickly. Do you think that they would take the time to say, hey, make sure to lock the doors and turn off the lights? I don't think so. I think we're looking at the probability being very low. I take an unknown person off the board. So let's look at Marysville PD. We have to look at Marysville PD, specifically Nickel, given where the investigation has led us and based on Nickel's own statements, reports, and violent history. Means? Yes. As with any other people that we discussed, anything could have been used as a weapon. Opportunity. Yes. We have an opportunity as Nickel was in the house. Nickel was the last one to see him alive based on his own reports. Eric also recalls that when he left Bernie was in his bedroom with Nickel, and that is where Bernie was found. Motive. Could Nickel have wanted information as to who was supplying Bernie the coke and Bernie wouldn't talk or flip? Or is it that Bernie wouldn't provide the combination to the safe? We heard from Dean what happened to him when he wouldn't tell Nickel who was with him that night. If you take all of the people listed, there's only one person remaining on the murder board who has all three: means, motive, and opportunity. And that's Nickel. I can't move Nickel off the murder board. But what does that even mean? At this time, nothing. I am just presenting the information I have discovered in my investigation and will leave it to BCI for further follow-up. Since I am not law enforcement, the only thing I can do is present the information I discovered in my investigation, and you make up your own mind as to what happened that night and the days after. Who is responsible for murdering Bernie and staging the scene to ensure it was ruled a suicide? Who had the most to lose? Before this season wrapped up, I wanted to hear from Bernie's mom and Paula on how they felt the investigation went and get their final thoughts. Here's Gloria again. What's your overall thought on this whole process that I've done on John's case using the podcast?
I think you're doing a wonderful job. Very good. And of course, this is my first experience with anything like this, but I just think you're doing wonderful.
Oh.
Very good.
If you could send a message to the listeners, what would that be?
I would just say that I'm so glad that you're doing this, and we hope to have justice someday after all these years. It brings back so many memories that I choke up every time I think about him. And, it hurts so bad, even after all these years.
And that's the goal, right, is to bring this to the forefront and get justice.
That's it. It sure is. I'm so happy you're doing this. And I think that you're doing a very good job.
Thank you.
Hopefully you can do it, Melissa.
I hope so too, Gloria. I hope so too. Here's something. Because it's very possible that the person who killed Bernie is listening to the podcast. And what's your message to that person?
Oh, I can think of so many things. How could you do a thing like that? And why would you want to kill a young fellow that half your, a third of your size? And what kind of a person are you? Mm-hmm. And I'd have to even think about ever forgiving him.
Right.
I know I'd have to pray a lot in order to be able to forgive him if I was talking to him. But we all have to forgive, in order to be forgiven by God.
Yeah. Do you feel like the person needs to finally come forward?
Definitely. For his own conscience, even. He should come forward even before this. Definitely.
Gloria relies heavily on her faith to get her through every day and for the past 30 years. Gloria prays the person responsible is held accountable and asks for forgiveness before it's too late. Gloria told me that she learned new information about the case that she had not known before. She found out about Bernie winning the award at Honda. She shared her disappointment about Eric and felt Bernie was used by many. Gloria has her theory on who's responsible and hopes the BCI does their job. I then reached out to Paula to get her final thoughts. When we first started this investigation, back in February to where we are now in November, what's your overall thoughts on the whole process?
I think we've found out more information. I had never heard anything from all of those people. I know my dad had talked to some, but it was interesting to hear some of their stories, being right there in the town and in that group of people.
Was there anything that came out during the investigation that surprised you that you didn't know before?
I did not know, the reason John and Alan lied on the stand about and convinced the jury that they did not do the break-in. I didn't know that of course they're not going to admit to it in the first place, but also I learned, they were afraid they'd try to pin the murder on him.
Right. Yeah.
So that I wasn't even thinking about that at the time of the trial. For them to think that way, they had to figure that a bad, corrupt police force would do something like that.
I remember telling you about Eric being the inside man, and that was new information to you all as well.
Yes, I had no idea. I thought it was strange calling the police, but it never dawned on me that Eric would have set up a robbery with his friend, for his friend. That just amazes me.
I know some people have been hesitant, families, worried about a podcast or hurting an investigation. What has been your experience working with me in this podcast? Would you recommend other families who are searching for justice to do something like this?
Yes, I don't feel it could hurt our situation at all due to the fact no one's been working on it. Mm-hmm. So this brought ours back to the spotlight, shall I say, to help get it out there. And I've learned things from it that I didn't know. And hopefully it will continue on being investigated.
What's your hope?
I hope there is arrests made by other people today that's out there to help, hopefully the BCI. Mm-hmm. I hope they would question the police chief of Marysville, the other police on the force, and the narcotics detective. All need to be, I believe, the people that were at John's house are responsible for the murder. Police brutality and police corruption, even to the fact of setting the cocaine around his bedroom, which would not have been in there when he called the police.
Right, yeah.
There's no way would you walk in the bedroom where the safe was, and the picture showed him just placed on all over his dresser, several, and then several on his nightstand. They wouldn't have been there.
Right.
So that's the police or Nichols doing that.
I think it's important because it's very likely that the person or persons responsible for John's murder is listening to this podcast and have been following along. And what's your message to that person?
That would be to do the right thing, to turn yourself in and accept responsibility for your corrupt, inadequate work.
I want to be honest with you all right now and let you know what this is really like. It is one of the hardest parts of any investigation is when this season comes to an end. Bernie's family, as did the Petty family, they get this renewed sense of hope that justice will finally happen. They're excited that their loved one's case regains momentum in the public eye. I can tell you that the Burnside family has felt how much you care about Bernie and them, as you have listened and followed along with the investigation and heard just how badly they were treated by Marysville Police Department. As we close this season of Dog with a Bone, my question is for Marysville, Union County, and BCI. Why has it taken 30 years and Bernie's case is still not solved? We have a very short time frame for when his murder happened, a small circle of those who could have committed and staged the murder, and yet no one has been charged with the murder? You have to ask yourself, with a town this small, less than a handful of people who saw Bernie that night, why is this case still unsolved? Seems like it would be a pretty open and shut case if it was John, Alan, or Eric. But nothing has happened. And why is that? It's because it wasn't them. It's up to you to decide, based on everything I've uncovered in this season of Dog with a Bone, who you think is responsible. The last thing I want to say to the ones responsible for Bernie's murder is this. Here we are again, and we're not going anywhere. But now what happens? What happens when the episodes stop? When the listens end? Where does that leave them? Where does that leave Bernie's case? Back in the dark? I can hear the fear and anxiety in their voice at what is next. I have reassured the Burnside family that the dog pound is not going anywhere. If things do not progress with the investigation, we go to the next steps to ensure justice and accountability finally happens. Time is up. I could not have done this investigation without these two gals who I first met at Steffen's A Neutral Place. When I first met them, I continued to say Eula's name wrong for a very long time, but she was so kind and she never corrected me. I also called Vicky, Jackie more times than I can remember, but I just wanted to give them an opportunity to tell you about their journey and their work on this season. Here's Eula. You have really been involved in Bernie's investigation from the start. Tell me a little bit about why you decided to get so involved.
I felt like somebody needed to be a voice for Bernie. And I remember him from years and years and years ago, and I felt like it was so unfair that he was just brushed under the rug, that somebody needed to help.
Yeah. And as I said before, I don't get paid, and of course I don't pay you or Vicky. So this has taken a lot of your time and dedication. What drives you to continue to do it?
I guess I'm one of those people that like to speak for the underdog and justice, and I just don't like the fact that in my heart I feel like the police were involved, and somebody had to speak up and find the truth, and that's just kind of what drove me.
I think you and Vicky are like dogs with a bone, like me, and I could not have done this without the both of you helping support me and do all that you've done, so I greatly appreciate that. What's this whole investigation taught you or opened your eyes? Like, what was something that you learned that you didn't know before?
Trying to stay impartial, I guess, and just following like each lead and what I might uncover, or what you might uncover, or Vicky uncovered, and then kind of digging into that. I mean, it just blew my mind, some of the things that I didn't know about before.
Right.
That, the different people that were involved, what they had to say. It brought back a lot of memories for me growing up and, living in Marysville.
Yeah.
So it was a real eye-opener. I didn't realize how far the corruption went. I knew they were bad, but I didn't realize how bad until we really started digging into this case.
And I found that one of your passions is to research and investigate. And you really took this mission and went to the library and checked out books on autopsies. And just like me, that is kind of my niche, what I like. And so you really decided, hey, I'm going to learn as much as I can about this autopsy report, and really understood more of lividity and the bag over his head and how long someone could survive. And so, you definitely were like, I'm going to educate myself on this stuff.
Yeah, I love to learn, and medical is kind of where my niche is, if you will. I really like that part of investigating crime scenes, and I'm one of those, I'd love to just go to, I think they call it the body farm. I think stuff like that is so fascinating to me. I mean, I guess it's kind of morbid, but it helps me understand a lot more, and that's why I just kept digging, and I love to read, so.
I could not have done this without you and Vicky's help and, taking me around Marysville. And that was such a great experience. And to meet up again from the first time we met in the bar, because it was like, we don't really know you, so we're going to meet together, to, hey, I'm staying at, Vicky's house.
Right.
But if there's going to be a season 2 and you have committed to staying on.
Absolutely.
Here's what Vicky had to say. I want to ask you, Vicky, what made you decide to get so involved in this case?
Well, I'm the one who helped with the Bernie page, just from the Patty Atkins page. That guy started it. Him and I talked about Marysville not having just one unsolved murder, and that Bernie was one. So I kind of explained to him what we all had thought back in the day. And so he started that page, but he's been pretty focused with Patty's page, so there really hasn't been much going on with Bernie's page. But yeah, just the fact that I was around that time, I've been here my whole life, and it's just wrong. I knew that you didn't know anybody around here, so I was willing to help because he needed help.
You're the one who started the Facebook page or got it going with the 22 people that I originally found.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that, because that's what I found and got me interested right away. And I've said this before, obviously I am not getting paid for this, and so I can't pay you. What made you continue to do this?
Justice for his family. They deserve it.
What has this whole investigation taught you or opened your eyes on?
Oh, so much. Just having to dig through everything. I mean, like, you and I have to go to the library to even find out anything about Bernie's case, because you can't find it on Google. You search, you can't even find his obituary. So just having to go all sorts of places just to find the information that you need.
Yeah.
It's been pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I appreciate, that's one of the benefits to, having people like you and Eula in the town where this happened, given I live in Florida. You all did a lot of research and legwork for me being there, so I definitely couldn't have done this without you both. What's one of the things that you learned in this investigation that you didn't know before?
I learned a lot about just what happened, so it's just the stuff that we found out from his dad, the information that poor guy went through, and the fact that all the times that he posted in the paper, his mailbox that he created at the post office just for people to do stuff or send him in secret if they had to or whatever. It's just been mind-blowing, the things that I knew, basically the story. And so far it's been true, but just the amount of stuff that's just like, oh, wow.
Yeah, and I don't think I touched about that in the season, but Bernie's dad did have a mailbox, a P.O. box that he kept open, and he would post in the newspaper, people who wanted to leave information, that was one way that they could contact him without providing a name or a number. And that's where he found out MacGyver was never on scene, was through this mailbox.
Yes.
And his dad, as we've said before, dug and basically was solving his son's own murder. And
yes.
I think he knew exactly what happened, but yet obviously couldn't get anything to happen. One of the biggest things that I relied on you a lot on was you are so creative. You helped create these whiteboards. All the whiteboards that you all see that I post is all because of Vicky. She would work on that and make it look pretty for me, and we would sit there and she would, format it for me, and that's all her. I give her 100% credit for that. But she was very good at organizing the photos that you see she took. So kudos to you and dedication and being able to help me do what I do. I couldn't have done it without you. So I want to thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So is there anything else that you want to say, or any messages that you have?
I just pray to God for justice for Bernie.
Yes.
I and now that I've met his family and I've talked to his family, I want it even more, because they are just the sweetest people, the nicest people, the most caring people, And to have to go through this and not have justice for this whole time, I just can't imagine.
The truth is, you are never done and you continue to work cases until there's an arrest. I sat back down with James and we did a final interview on the investigation and where we go next.
All right, Melissa, here you are. Man, didn't think when I met you at CrimeCon that we would be here and you're wrapping up your first season. Big congrats to you. Just wanted to talk about some of the stuff that you've experienced throughout the season, some of the things that you've witnessed, takeaways, learning lessons, things that you wish you can change if you were to do this again, maybe even. I look back at my first season, I was like, oh man, I missed this. There's tons of that, right? Especially when you're editing audio and you're listening to yourself constantly, like, oh, you could have asked this question. But hindsight 2020. So looking back at the start, what were your expectations coming into this from an investigative perspective?
My expectations were really high, I think. I think I aim high and I have big expectations. And so I was ready to go. I had high expectations that a lot of people would want to talk, that I would be able to solve this very quickly.
But you kind of have to have that belief if you're going to do this, though, right?
Yeah, you do.
You kind of have to ignorantly think like, I'm going to solve this. And I remember thinking that about and people asked me about my first season with Nancy's. And I was like, oh, when I started, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to solve it. That's kind of like the mentality you have to have. It's that dogged mentality.
It is. And I think too, you're absolutely right. I mean, that was me from the get-go. And I'm trying to like taper myself down here a little bit so I don't sound so ego. But no, it's like, I've got this. I'm going to solve this. I know what happened, but it's can you prove it, right? And still get that information and be open-minded. But yeah, no, my expectation was I'm going to get it. I'm going to finally get justice for Bernie.
And through that process, what was the most challenging part of the case?
I think getting all of the information, the documents, because it was 1993. And so you don't have a lot of things that you would normally have because this wasn't really investigated as a homicide. So what I was looking for was trying to show like, okay, so once it was deemed a homicide, what was done? Like, where's all of the investigation notes and interviews? And there was none, or it got destroyed in a flood in Marysville. So that was really one of the hardest things in this investigation is that even though it was in 1993, there should have still been files and interviews and things that the police did once it was deemed a homicide, but according to Marysville, all of that got destroyed. So I was working from very minimal documents.
You don't have any digital documents either, right?
No digital.
There's very little that you're going to have. That makes it extremely challenging, of course, and you're dealing with this natural, they said it flooded, right?
Yes. We've talked about this before. The good news here is that Bernie's dad had everything. Thank God for Bernie's dad. I mean, literally, like this man solved his son's murder, I believe. Talk about a dog with a bone. His dad has everything in that briefcase and files and paperwork, and he got copies of everything and the autopsy and the photos. And so everything I got was really from his dad. I didn't get anything from the police department. It was all from his dad's briefcase.
And so you, obviously, with the family, you've built a relationship with them.
Yes. I just got off the phone with his mom, and she just is so excited and happy with the podcast and telling just like how grateful and appreciative. And she actually learned things she didn't know about the investigation or Bernie because she lived in California. So she was learning stuff as well. And she just is so grateful and just really hoping that justice finally comes for them and for Bernie. So yeah, it was really great. And then obviously Paula and Steve, I met with them when I was in Marysville and I talked to Paula weekly. So yeah, just a great family.
Yeah. Doesn't it feel good? You're able to share stuff with them. They're like, we didn't know. It feels like you're getting them information that they didn't through the grit work that you're putting in. They wouldn't have had that stuff. And then Bernie's story wouldn't have been to where it's at today.
No, not at all. And I can say this now because it'll be out tomorrow, but one of the fun moments was when we learned that Bernie wasn't a virgin. And so, listen,
You remember you told me
it
that?
was amazing. And I hope people don't take it wrong. But let me tell you, everyone I've ever talked to from the get-go said, no, Bernie didn't have any relationships. He didn't have girlfriends, no romantic relationships, because usually that's a great source of information. And so Paula and Steve are like, no, he's never had anyone. And we went to a Steffen's, my new favorite place, and found out that Bernie had a girlfriend and was romantic with her. And then we all did Bernie's favorite drink, or had Bernie's favorite drink, Black Velvet and Coke.
Have you had it since? You said it was your one time and only time.
I will not have it again. I will not have it again. Unless there's an arrest, and then it's Black Velvet and Coke all around the States. For everyone listening, we're all going to do shots together or something. We can't even do shots. It was a drink. It ripped my stomach up. I don't even know what it is. It's like whiskey.
Yeah, Black Velvet, yes.
Is it whiskey?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, yes. Black Velvet is a whiskey. I'd have to look it up, but yeah, I'm familiar. Yeah.
Oh my God. Melissa does not drink whiskey. And so I drank it to celebrate Bernie's, not being a virgin, because I thought it would be fun. And then I realized, oh boy, whiskey and Melissa?
Yeah, it's a pretty big whiskey bottle sold for about $7. So you can kind of understand the type of whiskey you're drinking here. Is
that bad or good?
Well, let's just say the price of the whiskey, the higher the better, right? The more, the quality wise, right? For anything.
No wonder it ripped up my stomach.
Yeah.
I don't know. So Bernie would drink only that. So the next day when we went to see Paul and Steve, we told them the good news, and they were just so excited.
We caught that in the episode, obviously. That moment of you sharing it, you guys are talking, and you can hear their reaction. It's new information that can mean so many different things for the case or just about them.
Yeah, his brother-in-law, Steve, was like, yeah, Bernie. I couldn't put it all in, but he did the fist bump, and he's like, that's my guy, They were just so happy to hear that he had that connection with somebody. And that came out through the investigation.
Working on this case, how has it impacted you personally?
In so many ways. I'm always somebody who wants to fight a good fight, and I get personally invested in the families I work for and with the victims. And when there's such an injustice done, I take it personally. So I work extremely hard at digging for the truth, and I'm an emotional person in general. And so trying to balance my emotions versus the investigation is always a challenge for me. Yeah, personally, it's been a lot on my family. My family has been supporting me through this whole thing. And that means everything to me, that I get to do what I love, and that they're emotionally, financially, everything helping support me to do this. So it's meant a lot to me to live my dream.
Yeah, it's a lot. I could attest to that you have a family, to do this, they got to be behind you.
They do.
Because it's a lot to ask of them with how much time this takes to investigate, interview, follow up, travel, write, produce. These interviews that you probably know can go hours. Next thing you know, dinner time is past and it's 11 o'clock, and it's like, so you're definitely takes its toll. So kudos to the family for holding it down for you. In Marysville, how did the community respond to you? You were there multiple times throughout the year. How did they respond to you? If you think back to when you first started, and here you are with this mic, walking around town, wanting to interview people, and then episodes are coming out. Tell us about that season.
Yeah, so Marysville was pretty open, I would say. The residents were from the get-go. When I went into Steffen's, I met Darren, I met Vicky, I met Eula. They were all really welcoming. And what I found is everyone who knew Bernie loved Bernie. And so people wanted to talk about Bernie, and they wanted to talk about the justice. And people were just happy that you were there, even investigating it or bringing it to light. And so I was welcomed from the start. When I went back again, same thing. People were excited to see me that saw me last time. There was more conversations that got to be had. So overall, it's been very positive.
That's good.
which I can appreciate. And that has to do with Bernie, that has nothing to do with me. It's that he was cared about and people want answers.
When you're there for the good fight, the community usually gets behind.
Yes.
No one wants someone in town that's capable of doing something like that. So that's great that you've had that type of experience with the community. Were there any breakthroughs or any unexpected discoveries throughout the season?
Yeah, the nickel tape. That was a huge moment.
Yeah.
That was massive. So when we found out about the tape recorder that Paula used, her son's Fisher-Price recorder toy, that whole image right there is priceless. I mean, for real. No pun intended, right? It's amazing. And the fact that she still had that tape and had that interview was just an amazing moment in this whole thing of this investigation. So that was like the biggest thing. I was so worried. I wasn't sure if I was going to play. No one's played it in 30 years. There was a lot riding on it.
I couldn't believe you had it when you called me. I remember you messaging, talking about it, and then listening to it. It's like, wow. Who would have thought that this would have stayed open or available to us today? Thinking back how many years and it was still working.
Yeah, it turned out pretty good. Kudos to Shane and everyone who tried to increase the volume and make it as audible as you can, because it is a tape recorder, but it was really good. And I gave that to Asia from the BCI. And so I think that was the biggest moment in this whole thing. Besides, Bernie having a relationship.
Yeah. I thought that was a powerful moment to kind of get that. And they thought this thing was probably long gone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. I honestly don't think there isn't any way that Nickel thought that tape ever still existed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any particular interview or moment that stood out to you that was challenging for you from the investigative perspective?
Eric.
Yeah.
Eric.
Why?
Because it's one of those things you prepare for and you need to be in the right headspace and you don't want to miss your opportunity to ask what you want to ask. And it's so quick that you're trying to stay in the moment and ask what you need to ask, but not miss anything that he said, right? To then go back and ask him. And so you only have like one shot because even now, Eric hasn't called me. He said he'd call me, hasn't called me. So there's all these follow-up questions I have that I can't ask him now. So that's the most challenging because I knew I wouldn't get another opportunity to speak with him. So, and of course, with that now, everyone has known I posted that his family are upset with me and kind of, looking at that as to why am I releasing that information or that interview with Eric? And so that's another challenge I'm working through right now.
Yeah, I can relate when it comes to having that one shot to get those interviews. And then you look back and you're like, oh, you missed this, or oh, you could have done that. But yeah, it's one of those things, man, where as long as I've been doing this, I've gotten better to learn how to be able to know when to sit back and let them talk and then when to press, but you never get it right. No one bats 1,000%,
And I think that was the same for me with Coots's call, right? I didn't expect him to call me back and he's at work and you have very few. And I'm like, how do I get what I want to get from him? I can't believe he's called me back. I didn't get anywhere near where I would want to have got with him because it's that balance. And he was at work and I was like, how far do I push? And you're just kind of caught off guard,
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, been there.
Yeah.
Did you get any surprising responses from listeners or people close to the case throughout the season?
Yeah. So we heard from Dean. That was a big surprise. I don't know if it was a big surprise, but it definitely opened my eyes more to the violence that people experienced in Marysville and that people were coming forward and they weren't afraid anymore of talking.
Dean is the individual who called you about his own experience with nickel, just for reference.
Yes. Yeah. So he was the 16-year-old. And he, finally said, I'm not afraid anymore. Like, I'm going to talk about what happened to me. And, the fact that he believes the only reason why he still here is because he was 16. So that was a really moving moment, and I just felt horrible. I felt bad. I felt sad for him. You know, he popped his shoulder back in himself. Just, that was a hard interview.
Yeah. Have you guys communicated since?
No. Mm-mm.
And I remember you sharing that and thinking, okay, well, that's showing a pattern of behavior. And if that's the type of way that he was conducting himself, then I'm imagining that this guy, at least, even if we're to say he has nothing to do with Bernie, let's just, for now, at least to say that this guy is probably not the first time or the last time, you know, if that's the level that he's taking
Taking it to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact that Dean doesn't remember him even arresting him. And so you take that extreme violence, and he didn't even go to juvie, but I'm like, his shoulder was popped out. But, you know, the fact that Nickel had no reservation, like he went so far physically violent, but yet then just let the kid go. And Dean said it was just so weird. And I got goosebumps because he wanted to know who was with me, just like I'm guessing he wanted to know who Bernie was getting drugs from. If he's willing to slingshot me around the neck for who I was with for a curfew violation, what is he going to do if he wants information about drugs?
Right.
I don't know. It was sad.
While traveling, did you ever feel like you were ever in a scenario or situation that you were concerned for your safety?
Not this time.
No.
Mm-mm.
That's good.
I think if I were to ever go back to Marysville, I probably wouldn't announce it. But no, not this time. It was more like under the radar. The podcast hadn't come out, so there wasn't a lot known yet.
What have you learned about the art of storytelling and investigative work?
It's really hard. And I'm not good at it.
Oh, stop.
I'm not.
Yeah, you are.
No, I thought it was going to be easier, but I find it hard. Like I can just like talk, but like storytelling is really difficult because, you know, I've been wanting to learn and be like you. How to be like James. What would James do? Because you tell such great stories, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I would like to take a lot of credit, but I have to give a lot of it to my wife or also to Sarah because they helped me out a lot of that because I'd write, and then it'd be like, you're all over the page, dude. And I'd be like, okay. So, but I appreciate that. Thank you for the compliment. I definitely can relate to that. What do you think was the most challenging part when it came to you creating your own podcast? Like, what was the most difficult thing for you?
The most difficult from the podcast is just the recording and the writing. You know, I had to learn and from you, right? Like not to read it. So I'm used to like just getting on and talking, and I found myself just not wanting to miss anything. So reading more than telling the story. And so I realized if I'm just more me, then that's much better for me. It flows much better than just trying to read it. But you get nervous about wanting not to say something that's not right, or you wrote this whole thing out, but now you're not going to read it. So it's like a balance of how do you get the information that you want to say without having it sound like you're reading from a script.
Yeah. There's an art to it for sure. I
haven't gotten there yet, but I'm trying.
Well, you're doing good. I remember going from my first episode to second to third, even my fourth season. I like got to episode 3 or 4, and I was like, I am reading this completely different than how I was at the beginning. So I had to go back and re-record. Like, it's an ongoing. You always gotta practice. We're talking about practice. Let me get to this other question I have here for you. What do you hope your listeners ultimately take away from this season?
That's a good question. To fight, to stick up for others, to, if something's wrong, it's wrong, and to stand up to injustice and make sure that voices are heard and not forgotten. Fight the good fight.
Fight the good fight. As you wrap up this season, what's next for you?
Not Black Velvet and Coke, I can tell you that.
I was hoping you would say you were going to take us all up on a drink for that, but apparently not.
I'll stick to my little Bud Light, please.
Or your Starbucks.
Yeah, my Starbucks. The holidays are coming up, so some definitely family time. But I am looking at season 2 and looking at cases. So I'm going to be putting out a post here shortly and asking for any recommendations on cases that have been our cold cases. And I focus on homicide cases. You do missing. I really enjoy or like to look at means, motive, opportunity in the sense of homicide. I think that that's where my niche is. So that's really where I'm looking to do another season, is another cold case, a homicide cold case. Yeah.
Feel like you need to take a breather?
It's funny because I say that and then I'll start getting the itch. So it's probably like a 2-week, I think, oh, okay. And now I'll sit here and be like, I better start looking. Oh, well, here's some cases. And then I'm back in the dog pound again. I can't stay away long. You think you're going to give yourself a break, and then you're like, okay, I'm just going to take this break. But there's something about it that fuels me. Yes, I work a regular job Monday through Friday, and then I come home and do these things. But this is my passion. And so if I don't do it, then I kind of feel like this empty spot. I need to be looking or investigating or helping, so I don't think it'll be long.
Yeah, I give it a week.
Yeah, pretty much. Jay would probably say, give her 2 days.
Yeah. It's those moments when I would wrap up the season and you're sitting there, and this is now normally the time you'd be investigating, interviewing, and then you're thinking, yes, I want to take a break and I want to unplug for a second, but it's difficult when you, like you said, you're fighting the good fight, and you need that break, but there's that itch, like you said, that there's a hunger for us to get back to work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it drives us, that itch comes and you want to find that other case, it's weird because it's this thing within you that just has to keep looking and researching and finding different cases and want to be that voice. And it's a passion. I can be sitting on the couch thinking, I'm not doing anything, and now I'm scrolling through my phone. I'm like, oh.
Yep. It's the motivation that'll make you work to get your show out through a storm, a tornado, not a storm, tornado.
Hurricane,
too. Thank you. It's the passion that'll make you work 48 hours straight, and you would think, well, why would I ever do this? And I'm not getting paid enough for this. So why am I doing this? That's what it is. There's that hunger. And so I'm excited to see where you're going, with what you got going on next in season 2. Of course, we're always going to stay up to date with Bernie, right?
Yes. And so I actually just got off the phone with Bernie's mom, and I told her, the same thing, is that even though the season's done, it's never done. That just like Judy's case, I continue to follow up and keep in contact with the family. Same with Bernie's. I will continue to speak with the agent from BCI, and my goal is to continue to push this forward regardless if episodes are out or not.
What I didn't do in my second season that I experienced in my third, just to share this, and I think you saw it though, was just how the community really got behind in Brittany's season, and there was still is individuals today who are very active in supporting and getting behind the family and who are not going silent and rallying up. If there's an opportunity from someone in that community and individuals who'd be willing to be that connection in supporting the family as well, is there a way that they can even reach out to you? Or I know you got the Facebook community going, but I know sometimes people want to speak directly to you versus being public about helping out. Can they reach out to you for that?
Absolutely. So you can always message me on Facebook and we can get on a phone call. Or, I have the number for the Q&A. You can call and leave a message there, and then I'll call you back. So yeah, absolutely. I appreciate Marysville, who the people have come together and they're hanging flyers in their shops and their businesses and talking about Bernie's case so much that it's just like wildfire spreading right now. So I continue to get messages from people like, I just heard about your podcast from my friend and I live here. So it's really great to hear that people are all in this fight together. So definitely. I'm more than happy to talk to you and see what we can do.
That's awesome. You have any questions?
Yeah. So you took me under your wing for season 1.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you think it went, or are you sure you want to do a season 2?
Oh, gosh. Well, I told you this before. We've had many conversations. There are a lot of people who sit in your seat who say they want to do what you've done. And, who am I to get in the way of anybody who comes to me passionately and says, hey, they want to get into this, and then let's do it. But only one has done it, and that's you. So your passion and why you're doing it is absolutely why I find it an honor to partner with you in your second season and moving forward, however that looks. But to watch you go through this, I'm absolutely 100% doing a season 2 with you. But I think that what I'm most proud of you throughout the season is how you've been able to process what most podcasters deal with when they first start off, is that criticism from people. So I told you, hey, haters got a job to do. There's always going to be a percentage of that. And I didn't feel like that actually even was an issue for you at all throughout the season. You got brought up in conversations, but it didn't ever seem to waver you. Your passion for the investigation is there. When you see someone who works as hard as what I've witnessed from you, you need more people like you who are willing to go out there and fight that fight. So if I could have 10 more of you, that'd be great.
Oh my God, that would be... Oh God, don't wish that on anybody, James. Oh my God, you were your phone would blow up all the time. Text. So are you looking to expand Sasquatch Productions?
Oh yeah. If someone like you who wants to go at it and who's serious about this and his passion is for the investigation, absolutely. We're always looking to build. I really would love to be able to build something that had a relationship with law enforcement. Even if we had a team, whether it's my show, your show, a network, that's something I'm trying to put together, is really trying to figure out a way that can bridge the relationship with law enforcement and us in a way where we're not getting in the way, but we're also doing the good work and doing the free work to them. So absolutely, always looking to expand. I'm also looking at stepping away to doing something different than just a missing person case for a different show coming up, but always looking to expand.
What's one thing that you learned from this season with Bernie's? What was one thing that you really took away or enjoyed finding out? You do missing person, so what was it like from working a homicide side? Early
on, you have these questions that you get answers to. So for me, I don't have answers usually for these. So you're saying so we have the body, and then the main things were the hit to the head and discovering that it was claimed suicide, but then after they looked at his body, and that to me was every time I would have a question, that would get answers and answers and answers from you. So that was very different. So I'm man, we're kind of getting to the end real fast. It seems as you're kind of following this, but that was different. I think the other thing about Bernie is he was this low-key guy. He was below the radar, didn't need to be, as I learned about him and even hearing about the relationship he had, or, even the amount of money he did have, he wasn't this guy who was, and he kind of kept below the radar. And I just appreciate that mentality. Hearing that he had this girlfriend was also fun, especially hearing it in the episode. I thought that was awesome. Was it different seeing the autopsy photos and having that kind of different investigation? In the missing person side, you don't know if they're alive or if something happened. Here we are looking at a crime scene, and we do see Bernie with the bag. We do see the trauma to the brain. We do have that. So what was that like for you? It makes it more real. Like you said, missing person cases, you don't know this big mystery that's covering over this individual and it follows them, and you're just constantly wondering, and that's the realness of it when you look at it and you see those pictures. This is us sharing the stories, but it's not entertainment in a way where this is the real side of it when you show those pictures. Take away all the entertainment that we think that people try to spin it as, and to me that's what's sobering. I think it's one of those things that I always have to keep in mind as
One of the last images we have of Bernie is him standing there in his house handcuffed. And that photo hit me extremely hard because within not even an hour from when that photo was taken, he was dead in his own home. And he had no idea it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very eye-opening moment. And then you go from that photo to him on his bed with a bag over his head. It is just gut-wrenching.
Yeah. The thing I think of is just, it's sobering. And there's the realness of this.
Yeah. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
One of the things real last I was going to say is usually I have experienced in other areas where there's a lot of people who want to fight about whatever. And I'm kind of getting that a little bit now with Eric's family members again, but which is so weird to me because I'm investigating his buddy's murder. Like, what is Eric so flippin' upset about? It's not about Eric.
Yeah.
But normally you might have, like in Brittany's case, right? You had a lot of people who from Ashley's side, right, coming at you, all of that. In Bernie's case, I think there hasn't been that. Up to this point, I haven't had people come at me because of whatever I've interviewed or talked about or even putting out Nickel. No one has come up and said, why are you putting that out there about Nickel? He's not that kind of guy. Like, crickets. Really? I mean, not that I'm asking anyone to do it. Don't do it. You don't need to let me know. Season's over.
Yeah.
But it's weird that no one has come up to say, that's not true.
Do you think that has anything to do with the age of the case?
No.
No?
I don't think so. Because everyone I've spoken to or knows that around that time know the individuals. And I'm not getting that pushback, which I was very worried about when you look at, and I've said this before, I'm not saying he's a person responsible, but you have to look at the cops there that night. They were the last ones to see him alive, right? And you never want to think that, but we have to. That's why we're here and investigating. It's a cold case. But you always worry about maybe people coming at you because you're saying, well, you got to look at law enforcement. And that can be uncomfortable for people. But I have not received that.
That's good. That takes off a lot.
Yeah.
If you can avoid that.
That's why you haven't heard me be all emotional because I haven't got the haters yet, James.
What advice would you give someone considering their own investigative podcast?
Buckle up. Come under Sasquatch Productions. No, I would say that you have to have a good family support. You have to have a good support around you. Like I have mentioned before, my husband edits all of my episodes. I am so grateful for him. You have to have somebody like James who helps guide you. And, you just need a lot of key people around you. So, but you have to have a passion. You have to have a drive. This is not something that you just like wake up one day and say, well, maybe it is. I don't know. But you just can't be like, oh, I want to do it. You have to have something within you because at the end of the day, right now, I mean, there's no financial reward. There's nothing that you have to say, oh, look at, like, I got paid this amount for doing all this work. There's nothing like that. You have to do it for the right reasons, which is fight the good fight and be that voice. So I think it's all on what your goals are. You're not going to make a podcast and get rich.
Looking back, what are your final thoughts on the story of John Burnside?
My final thoughts are somebody decided that Bernie was nobody that anybody would care about. I think that whoever is responsible thought that they could just get away with it because no one really cared. That's what I think. But they're wrong. That's my final thoughts, that I care and people are caring and people are getting to know him that don't even live in Ohio. So I think that's important. Thank you all for listening to season 1. I'll see you back in the dog pound for season 2. Dog with a Bone is hosted, investigated, produced, and written by Melissa Sandberg. Additional writing by Caitlin Sandberg. Edited by Jason Sandberg. Theme music by Alex Yukich. Dog with a Bone is a Sasquatch production.